everyone. I'm honored to be here. I feel the slight thrill in the room when he said last. I'm honored in part because of the range of who's here. For example, just from Alabama, I just picked a state at random, at the conference were representatives from the State Department of Education, the state legislature, the Higher Ed Commission, the Department of Early Childhood Education, the Alabama Education Association, local school superintendents, and the state board. And in the audience, I'm honored to have Governor Wolf here, their governors and their staffs here. There are community leaders and foundations, there are nonprofits, there are teacher representatives, there are college access groups like NCAN, business leaders, and I have twins that are 4.5 years old, even though, it's super fun. And boy-girl twins, we can talk all about it. Have you heard the best way, by the way, to train a man to be married is to be a boy-girl twin? Because he learns from the moment of birth who he's meant to serve. But anyway, but it's super fun, and they're wonderful. But it does, since my work at the College Board is at the intersection of high school and college, boy, raising 2 young children shows you how much this is a continuum, how much the decisions you make in the early part of life relate to the future. And so what I love about this audience is breaking down the silos and seeing that full picture from early childhood all the way up, from legislative to those in the schoolhouse, putting aside your differences to work on the behalf of children. I think that's amazing. And I think in particular, it is a reflection of what Jeremy has built at ECS and why this is such a special institution. So since it's the last plenary, can we give one more applause for him for his leadership and what they do here? The other reason I'm so delighted to be with you is I feel like you, like me, live in a world where your good work for students is... Hi, Andy. What a nice surprise to have you here. Me, like you, live in a world where, given your good intentions to help students, your work is always reported fairly by the media, never mischaracterized. And I just feel common purpose with you, that never does the perception of your motives or what you've done get distorted as you try to pursue your good work. So I just feel so comfortable that we share that. And I thought that due to that, while I would love to talk to you solely about 2 codes, about 2 master arts that might help students succeed in the next generation, I ought to address some of the controversial things going on at the College Board that you may have heard about as directly as I can, and then give you some time for questions, in addition to the question of 2 codes. The College Board is well known for advanced placement, for the SAT, but our purpose is for all students to own their future. That's why we're here. And that is, in a way, a bold purpose to enable all students to own their future. But what I want to talk to you about today is I think the best way maybe to think about achieving something large is a new humility. And I want to talk to you about humility around things that tend to be bigger than life and about a proper seeing of our role and what it's best for us to do, and interestingly, what's actually best to leave others to do. So the first area where I'd like to talk about that with is a non-controversial thing, which is the SAT itself. You just say the letters SAT and you know controversy's coming. And my friends ACT may live the same life at cocktail parties, I'm not quite sure. And why? Why does this phrase, SAT, cause such a generation of emotion? I think it is because people feel and never forgive you for the sense that you are rating their entire being with a single score. In other words, it's as if the SAT tells you how intelligent you are, or what your future might be, or how good you are in some weird sense. It scores you far too broadly. I think we need a much humbler view of what the SAT tells you and does not. It is a valid exam of a core set of reading, writing, and math skills that you use over and over again in the first year of college or career training programs. That's all it is. That's all it is. Doesn't tell how smart you are. There are many forms of intelligence not seen here. It does not fully describe human excellence. There are many excellences that go far beyond that description. But it does. The new test design, as you may know, we revised the test in 2014, is based on a simple principle. Rather than testing SAT words, which you could define as words you shall have not likely heard before and shall not hear again, the new design tests the words you'll see most often. Instead of tricky math problems, it tests the math you use most often. In other words, it was always a bad idea that kids went to high school and then did this other thing, which was study for the SAT. And that led to huge disadvantages. We should focus on the core of what you need most. So that was the revision. And I'll tell you something I feel a little strongly about. I think it's also really important to get math back, a kind of modesty about what the real math requirements are, than covering so much math that is not used again. So we continue to work with college faculty and others in career training environments to make sure the math on the SAT is limited to those areas that you're really going to use over and over again, so that practice advances you. And finally, of course, it was not enough to revise the test itself to make it simpler and clearer, but we had to address the fact that the inequalities of test preparation made it simply a scandal that this assessment measured merit and not wealth. In other words, if you got special access through test preparation that was highly costly to the exam, it wasn't fair. So we partnered with Khan Academy to provide the best of test preparation free for the world. 8 million students have signed up. We've shown it 6 to 9 hours of practice. They can, 30 seconds after they take the PSAT, they get a personalized account on Khan Academy. It advances them, and further still if they practice more. We're still working to get kids at all levels of income and in all parts of our society, pouring them into that kind of devoted practice. But to me, this is a fundamental change. I actually don't care that much that they improve their SAT score. But I care a lot that they learn that through practice, they can own their future, that they can make a claim on their future by what they do today. So why the SAT? Why keep it if it gets people angry and it's a single score and that's in some ways reductive? Why do this? I've been wondering about that. And I think it's part of something this country needs to confront, which is the crisis of debt without degree. We have to face much more squarely that college is a great thing if you're ready for it. But if you're not, it's rather perilous. That is, going to college advances you if you complete it swiftly and successfully. It ruins you if you take too long or do not complete. The SAT helps tell the truth about what kind of college you're ready for. And it's better to give that kind of truth to students and families on their way into that. Only 1/3 of students who enter remediation in college ever leave. The other issue in college, of course, is students can go dreaming that they might be engineers or scientists or enter certain kinds of careers. But if they don't have those core math skills that tests like that measure, they wind up losing those dreams and going into other majors. And it hugely affects their career income over their life. The best guarantee that they can handle those challenges is, of course, to have done college-level work in high school. Whether that's through excellent dual credit programs, IB programs, or advanced placement, we find students who earn a 3 in advanced placement are 2 to 4 times more likely, a 3 or above, to major in a STEM field, to stick with it, because they get past the hazing of first-year courses. So in my judgment, by the way, when you look at the debt crisis in the United States, did you know that students who drop out, who don't complete, are only 30% of the borrowers and 50% of the defaults? The crushing debt is often not the big numbers you hear, but more often $10,000. And you might think, hey, that's not a big number, unless you think about who the working poor of this country are, who with only a high school degree are living paycheck to paycheck. Even a parking ticket can derail their lives, and $10,000 of debt is overwhelming and destructive. We have to face these forces. It is my belief that grades and test scores both have their limits. We at the College Board would never defend admissions based on a single score alone at all. There should be a holistic picture of kids. But none of us should be naive that if we suddenly relied on one measure like grading, that other corruptions would not follow. I think all of you in policy have learned when you count too much on one number, that number begins to degrade. What I'm trying to say to you is we already see that grades are raising faster in wealthier schools than in other schools, but imagine there was no check of the exam. Imagine if the only thing between kids going to college was whether teachers would give them a certain grade, and the pressure would arise. This may sound to you theoretical, so I asked the AP teacher community what they thought, how much pressure would descend on them if we just got rid of the AP test. And you'd be amazed at the intensity of their answers, how much it shields the teachers to have a separate measure. Having told you what I think about the SAT and a kind of humbler view of it, let's go on to the next controversial subject, which, have any of you heard about the environmental context dashboard and the so-called adversity score? Yeah. We're good at generating controversy here at the College Board. And I hate to disappoint you, but in a way, the tool is a lot humbler than you've heard. So I want to tell you a little bit about it and, of course, answer your questions. The environmental context dashboard helps admissions officers do what they've always done. So just to clarify, admissions officers the past 50 years have looked at school profiles, that is high school profiles, when they're evaluating students, and as well as try to get some sense of the neighborhood they come from to see the context for their achievement. They've been doing that for a long time. They came to us because they found they had school profiles on some schools, but not others. Does that make sense? So a bunch of rural high schools didn't even have school profiles. The data was very uneven. Some schools, you might imagine, had really nice school profiles. So they asked us if we could provide the data for those school profiles in a common format for them, and also if we could provide a common format for neighborhood data. Why? They also asked us, when you give us a student's SAT score, please show us how it compares to the other students in that school. So why would we do this? Because what a test cannot measure on its own is a third thing. A test can measure achievement, but what it can't see is resourcefulness. That is, if you just look at a test score alone without the context in which it arises, you miss so many kids who remarkably outperform their environment, who do so much with less. There's a young woman in rural Mississippi who at very elite school just let in. Her score was on average with other applicants, but they looked at it in context, they saw it was 300 points higher than other students from her high school in rural Mississippi. This young white woman might have been seen or might not, but she got a second look because they had the environmental context dashboard, because they could see how she related. You might see a student who's taken 2 AP courses or 3, but wouldn't you want to know that the school only had 2 or 3 courses that they could take? You want to get some sense of what a young person has done with the opportunities available to them. This is a rather modest idea and has been part of admissions for a long, long time. But then it got heavy with the media. There was a claim that there was an individual adversity score based on your personal information. The College Board, who brought you the SAT, has now decided it can measure your personal adversity on a scale of 1 to 100. And it has the gall to send that to colleges without your permission. And by the way, we will not tell you your personal adversity score. This is a very popular notion, as you might imagine. It relates to phrases like social engineering or picking winners and losers. So if you don't mind, I'd like to reduce the temperature for a bit. There was never, ever any individual component to the adversity index that was described for young people. Making sense? There was never any individual data in it. All the kids in the same school had the same school profile. All the kids in the same neighborhood had the same neighborhood profile. Same indicators. That was it. We never and never will change a student's SAT score. To be clear, and the College Board must be clear on this, the only thing the College Board should ever score is achievement. We should do that more richly than ever. We should look at projects. We should look at AP Capstone. We should look at what I'll talk about in civics and computer science. But that's our job of scoring. So that all was never true. But in my job, I think it's better to respond to criticism, to respond to the best reasons people are uncomfortable. And so we're going to announce some changes to make it more clear than ever relatively soon. We will make clear that there's no longer even a single number. It was never based on individual data, but we think there no longer should even be a single number because people will think it's a score, so we're likely going to get rid of that. I apologize, but the adversity score shall be dead. It was never a good idea, and it invites ideas that are unproductive in the minds of families and students and gets us off track. There's general context information about a neighborhood and about your high school that provides a general context, and I know that may not be as exciting, but that's all we believe there should be. We believe we have to be much more transparent and share exactly what public indicators that's based on, because again, our aim is not to have a fancy algorithm or score these. Adversity is common and all too evident, to tell you the truth. What's rare is resourcefulness, those young students who defy it. And then I want to be candid that people get worried that, like, what about a wealthy family who lives in a poor area, or what about, you know what I mean, those individual cases, a student who grew up in a wealthy family with great adversity, cancer, et cetera. Can I be clear? Individual information always trumps general. That is, we should always look at kids' letters of recommendation. We should always look at their essay. We should always look at income for an individual family. So what the dashboard never should prevent and should always yield to individual data. Am I making sense? Its only role is to take a second look. Its only role when first looking at an application is to say, maybe like legacies, like athletes, these athletes deserve a second look because they might have done something remarkable. And I'll finally address bluntly another criticism, which is you're taking a second look at everyone but the middle class, the fear that the middle class will be once again left out. People fear for the fate of their own children who are already working hard enough, and they feel they'll be overlooked. So let me speak with perfect candor. When we're worried about selective admissions in this way, please keep in mind, as Raj Chetty has reported, that over 50% of our elite colleges are from the top 1% of income in this country, which is something that those colleges do not want to continue, and we all must not continue. There is so much more talent out there than we can see, and that includes the vast populace of America who is not represented in our nation's colleges today. We will not change winners or losers. This is an input into admissions. Admissions officers use this as their judgment sees. But I hope you will see a new humility about the tool that will help you understand and help us be clear the College Board's ambition here to show a general context, but to allow those choices to admissions officers, but hopefully to help everyone see talent that might be unseen. Finally, when we talk about education, it is a big subject and opens up a lot of questions. But what if you could describe humbly just two things all kids could know to advance themselves? And as you heard Jeremy say, we've proposed in the next century that students would advance if they master two codes: technology, the code of our economy, and the Constitution, the code of our democracy. Right now, we think of civics and technology as two very separate realms, and we're paying a terrible price for it. These forces are deeply linked. Talking about them as two codes makes that explicit to students. They need both disciplines to be responsible, engaged citizens in the 21st century. You don't have to be a constitutional lawyer to grasp American democracy, and you don't need to be a computer programmer to grasp the principles of technology. But if you want to be a leader and not just a follower, if you want to be a shaper of your environment and not just a passive user, you need to understand these two codes. Think about what we've seen when we have a technology community leading those developments who are not sufficiently aware of privacy and the rules of individual liberty and what happens when they act without the other. Think about when public leadership is not adequately alert to the role of technology and how it evolves and how big data plays out. Think about what it is to try to be such a public-spirited leader without knowledge of those forces. One without the other doesn't work. And so we built a new course called AP Computer Science Principles, which does not ask you to become a coder, but to learn the power of technology and data by applying it to problems you care about. It was transformational. Our old coding course only had, always for 20 years, had 80% young men and only 20% young women. In 2010, in our old coding course, in 14 states, no African Americans took the exam. 11 states in 2010 had no African American or Hispanic examinees. But when we created a new invitation, the Computer Science Principles course, things changed very quickly. Already after 2 years, it's a 70-30 breakdown between young men and women in the course. 66% more female students earned a 3 or higher, 61% more African American students, 60% more Hispanic and Latino students, and 59% more rural and Native American students scored a 3 or higher. We need to change the invitation. There is so much more talent than we can see. Simply by making these courses available in a way that drew students to them, both these courses, our new American Government and Politics course and this new Computer Science Principles course, offer students a chance to do projects to show their intelligence in different ways. And it's amazing what you see. I spoke to Governor Wolf earlier about a phrase I invoked once. You can say when you see a course like the coding course have 80% young men and 20% young women, you can say it's not our fault. We just make courses. We don't choose who goes in them. But while it may not be our fault, it is our problem. Because if we don't fix those pipelines, if we don't make the knowledge of civics and technology broad in rural America, throughout our communities, we will have a country at odds with itself, as we see so vividly. So we would love your help in thinking of how we can get that work out, honor it, give it credit in college, make it available to students no matter how small their school is. That's the next chapter for us. And I would love to save a little time for your questions. Thank you so much for your attention. Please.
Hi, thank you. I have I'm over here, other side to your left, back corner. So I have a question about the adversity calculation, whatever you want to call it. What you're saying is you're going to make it dependent on the neighborhood that the student comes from and the school that the student goes to give some perspective. But as you know, elite university applications are so competitive today, and the things that people will do, we have these people who are going to jail out in California for bribing admissions officers. What is going to stop very ambitious parents from gaming that system and putting their kids for their senior year in the bad school in town, or getting a P.O. box, or renting an apartment in the challenging part of town? Because that's exactly where I see this ending up, with those people that you're trying to sort of balance the deck against, gaming the system for the benefit of their students.
A few things, just to step back for a second, is we will no longer, as we revise it, create a single, and you got that from what I said. We'll present these two things separately. I think it's smarter. And I don't want to talk too much about balancing the deck around anyone, but you're rightly saying we're trying to illuminate students who have overcome odds for a second look, just to kind of get our shared nomenclature. I want to be quite simple with you. P.O. boxes don't work. If a wealthy family were to move to an address to try to get the benefits of that, what I said was individual data about income is collected as part of the admissions process, and so that can be looked at. I just want to put it quite simply. This general data is like points for a second look, but it's individual data, like how long they've been in that high school, which is, again, readily available in the admissions process, that then becomes dispositive. So what I'm trying to tell you is, all this rather humble, remember they do this today, right? They could do this today. We could have this fooling around today, because admissions officers use school profiles and this data today, just in very informal ways. But what I think we can do by making it a little more formal is cut off those escape routes much more simply, which is create a clear process where individual data is always consulted, and this general information allows for a second look, but always must be confirmed by individual data.
Thank you, David. Quick question to your far left. Far left.
There, sorry.
Many states throughout the country in their ESSA plans are using either SAT or ACT scores as an indicator of college readiness. And they've made the assumption that it's an accurate and reliable indicator. It's a little different twist on using it for college admissions, but for readiness. I wonder your thoughts on the use of SAT as a college readiness indicator.
Thank you. It's a very thoughtful question. Let me tell you what I think, and you can tell that I prefer humility in what assessment shows, so I want to kind of be as square with you as I can. The college readiness benchmark on the SAT is based precisely on predictive data as to what your chances for getting a C or better in a first-year course. So it's forced. It's not our judgment. Furthermore, the subtests on analysis in science and analysis in social studies and history predict your success in social science and science courses, respectively. Making sense? So that is the evidentiary basis of it. It is an indicator, as you've said. What I would never be comfortable with it is as an exit exam from high school. So I think that is to go too far. And I've been really delighted because, since we have the con-free practice and other tools now around the SAT, some students who have struggled with the state test have actually practiced and advanced and gotten into college. So I think what it is it is simply a valid measure of a core set of reading, writing, math skills that gives you some indication of your likelihood to succeed in first-year courses and should be seen that humbly, but highly valuable in that sense.
Hi, I'm Carissa. I'm a college student, actually, and I did take the newer SAT, and I was just curious. I appreciate you saying that even though some issues with the SAT might not be your fault, it's still your problem, and one of the things I'm curious about is...
It's my fault as well.
No, it's not.
I'll take it.
Specifically with when we do like a GPA with SAT chart and that gives your scholarship. So in my case, like I was right on the cusp between like honors scholarship and a trustee scholarship, and it was just that I got a like 1380 and not a 1390. So like, what do you see in the role of like those? Like, how would you see changing those charts to be more like?
That's such a good
or
objection. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I think you're so right on this. So let me just say what you're saying and how much I agree with you. First of all, I like at least they did it on grades and this, and I hope that scholarships could be broader. Maybe look at what you overcame in contexts like we were talking about, maybe look at other activities, so I wish it were a broader picture. But I will say that one thing that we're struggling with is the celebration of false differences on these exams is not a good idea. I kind of sometimes prefer the AP model, where there's just a 1 to 5 score and less fussiness. And these exams, the kind of micro distinctions, the kind of cut points you're talking about, are not based in strong evidence, and you have to be very careful in their high-stakes use. So I think they're like a rule of thumb, if I'm making sense. Are you around that college readiness bar? Are you, by and large, in the top tier, ready for advanced work in these disciplines? Those are the kinds of questions these exams can answer, but not the subtlety of whether you're a high honors student or a... So I think you're right. A certain humility in their use, particularly around small distinctions, is very appropriate, and I'll work on it more.
Over here. David, I'd like you to say a little bit about the AP Capstone. I'm a big advocate of capstone projects. I love the fact that you can bring all this learning together and embrace the students' passions and aspirations and interests. And one of the pushbacks we get in Ohio sometimes when we talk about using not necessarily the AP product, but a capstone as a way of demonstrating and allowing students to show what they know is the variability in scoring and grading, and can you ensure consistency? So I'd love to hear you talk about both what you've done in terms of the AP Capstone and how you deal with some of those issues of how do you take 1,000 different approaches and bring some consistency to it.
Just a word about what AP Capstone is, just to bring everyone up to speed. It's a 2-year course, a seminar, and then a capstone research project. It's really cool. Kids pick a passion. They pick something they're into. It's not given by the College Board. And you'll see, I think you've probably noticed, the new courses we're developing, like AP Computer Science Principles and AP Civics, all have this project component, which forces profound questions of what he's calling interrelated reliability. How can you measure what we do in AP Capstone, which is collaboration, which is the quality of a project, and make that a similar scale for lots of students? We're now the largest investors in what's called that alternative assessment world. But I'll tell you something interesting about the College Board, and if any of you want a kind of soul enlivening thing when education can get rough sometimes, go see an AP reading and see the studio art review. For over 20 years, the College Board has dared to give a 1 to 5 rating on 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional art that has been widely accepted and celebrated in the artistic community through very careful mechanisms of mutual raters and then escalating. And we are getting superb feedback on this. And I think we've got to have courage because I do think intelligence is a wider and more beautiful thing than the SAT can measure alone. I think we have to keep going to a wider set of competencies that allow very different kids to show their strengths. So we're kind of all in on richer predictions. But we've been getting good reliability. I could go through the data with you. But it is fascinating people talk about standardized tests as a mere evil, but standards that are consistent across different people can be a very decent thing, because we can't live in a world where kids just claim to have done something awesome and say it for themselves. There must be some independent verification so it can have its appropriate power. So I love Capstone too, and I think I'm over time. So lest they never invite me again, I want to wish you a great day. Thank you so much.